I almost missed the last train. The announcement echoed across the empty platform while people hurried past me, dragging suitcases and carrying the kind of confidence I wished I had. My backpack felt heavier than it should have. It wasn't because of clothes or books. It was because of the secret I had carried for almost 10 years. If anyone had opened that bag, they would have found something that didn't belong to the version of me the world knew. A neatly folded lavender blouse, a soft gray cardigan, a pair of black tights, simple ballet flats. Nothing expensive, nothing dramatic, just ordinary women's clothing that somehow terrified me more than anything else on earth. I wasn't running away from home. I wasn't chasing a fantasy. I was simply trying to understand why putting on those clothes made me feel calmer than I had ever felt wearing anything else. That night, I told myself I was finally going to throw everything away. No more hiding. No more pretending. No more wondering who I really was. I stepped onto the last train home with one promise. When I got off, that bag would be empty. I had no idea I would never become the same person again. The train was nearly empty. Only a few passengers sat scattered throughout the carriage. A young couple quietly shared headphones. An elderly woman knitted without looking at her needles. A university student had already fallen asleep against the window. I picked a seat near the back and rested my backpack between my feet. The rain tapped gently against the windows. Outside, the city lights stretched into blurry golden lines. For the first time in months, everything felt strangely quiet. Then someone sat across from me. She looked to be around my age. Long brown hair tucked behind one ear. A cream-colored sweater. Dark blue skirt. Simple white sneakers. Nothing about her stood out except the way she smiled. Not the polite smile strangers usually exchanged. It was warm, comfortable, as if she somehow recognized me. "Long day?" she asked. I laughed awkwardly. "You could say that." She nodded toward my backpack. "Heavy. A little." I know that feeling. Something about her voice made me lower my guard.
We talked about ordinary things. Work, rain,
Late trains, coffee that was too expensive. The conversation felt effortless, almost unreal. Then she asked something that made my heart stop. "Have you ever carried something that wasn't heavy because of its weight, but because you were afraid someone would see it?" I froze. There was no way she could know. I forced a smile. "I guess everyone has secrets." "They do." She looked out the window. "But some secrets deserve kindness instead of fear." I couldn't answer. Instead, I stared at the reflection in the glass. For a split second, I imagined seeing someone else. Not the tired man everyone expected me to be. Someone softer. Someone peaceful. The reflection disappeared as quickly as it came. I looked back toward her. She was still smiling. "You looked happier just now," she said. "I didn't do anything." "You stopped pretending." Those words stayed with me long after our conversation moved to safer topics. The train continued through station after station. Passengers slowly disappeared. The carriage became quieter. Rain turned into thick fog outside. My phone buzzed. A message from my older brother. "Dad's asking where you are." I stared at the screen without replying. Home had never felt dangerous, but it had never felt safe either. My father believed there was only one correct way to live. One correct way to dress. One correct way to speak. One correct way to be a man. Anything else was weakness. As a child, I believed him. As a teenager, I feared him. As an adult, I simply avoided disappointing him. The woman across from me noticed my expression. "Family?"
Yeah.
"Complicated?" I laughed quietly. "That's one word for it." She nodded as though she understood more than I had said. "My mother used to tell me something." "What?" "The longest journey isn't across the country. It's the distance between who people expect you to be and who lets you sleep peacefully at night." I repeated the sentence silently. It settled somewhere deep inside me. The train suddenly slowed. The lights flickered once. Then everything went dark. For 3 long seconds, the carriage was completely silent. No lights. No announcements. Nothing. When the electricity returned, something felt different. The elderly woman was gone. The sleeping student had disappeared. The couple was no longer there. Only the woman and I remained. I looked around, confused. Where did everyone go? She simply looked out the window. We're almost there. There? She smiled again. The place you were always afraid to visit. A chill ran through my body. I think you've mistaken me for someone else. I don't think so. My heartbeat grew louder. The train wasn't following the route shown above the doors anymore. The station names had changed. None of them were familiar. There were no advertisements. No crowds. Only softly lit platforms decorated with flowers and old-fashioned lamps. It felt less like public transport and more like stepping into someone else's memory. I grabbed my phone to check the GPS. No signal. No internet. Even the time had frozen. 11:47 p.m. The same minute that had been showing for nearly 15 minutes. I stood up. I need to get off. The woman remained seated. You can. She pointed toward the next station. But if you leave now. She paused just long enough for my curiosity to overcome my fear. You'll spend the rest of your life wondering who you could have become. The train doors opened. A soft voice echoed through the
Carriage.
final destination. I looked outside. Waiting on the platform was a beautifully dressed young woman in a pastel pink coat, holding a small white shopping bag. She looked directly at me, smiled gently, then raised the bag as if she had been expecting me all along. My legs refused to move. Every instinct told me to stay inside the train until it returned to the real world, but something about the woman waiting on the platform felt strangely familiar. Not because I had seen her before, but because she looked at me without expectation. There was no judgment in her eyes, no curiosity, no amusement. Just kindness. The doors remained open. I looked back at the passenger across from me. Aren't you coming? She smiled. My journey ends here. What about yours? It ended the moment you stopped running. Before I could ask another question, she nodded toward the platform. Go. I stepped off the train. The cool night air wrapped around me, carrying the scent of fresh rain and blooming flowers. The station was unlike any place I had ever seen. It wasn't large or luxurious. It was peaceful. Old lanterns cast a warm golden glow over polished stone paths, and every bench was surrounded by carefully tended gardens. The train doors closed behind me. I spun around. Within seconds, the train disappeared into the darkness without making a sound. No tracks. No headlights. Nothing. It was simply gone. A nervous laugh escaped my lips. This has to be a dream. Maybe, the young woman said softly. Or maybe you've finally stopped dreaming. She walked toward me, holding out the white shopping bag. I believe this belongs to you. It can't. I think you'll be surprised. I accepted the bag carefully. Inside was a neatly folded cream-colored sweater, a navy pleated skirt, black tights, a simple pair of flats, and a handwritten note. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. You've spent years asking permission to become yourself. Tonight, no one is here to stop you except your own fear. There was no signature, only a small pressed lavender flower tucked inside the paper. Who wrote this? The woman shrugged. Does it matter? I don't understand what's happening. You don't have to understand everything before taking one honest step. She pointed toward a narrow street leading away from the station. At the end stood a charming boutique with warm lights glowing through its windows. Its sign simply read, "Second beginning." I think they were expecting you. I'm not going in there. She laughed gently. You've already decided to. I haven't. You've been deciding for years. Before I could answer, she turned and walked away. Wait. She stopped but didn't look back. When will I see you again? When you stop needing strangers to tell you it's okay. Then she disappeared around the corner. I stood alone with the shopping bag in my hands. Part of me wanted to leave everything behind and somehow find another train home. The other part, the quieter part, wanted to know what waited inside that little boutique. After several minutes, curiosity won. A tiny bell rang as I opened the door. Warm light spilled across polished wooden floors. Shelves displayed elegant scarves, cardigans, handbags, and shoes. Fresh flowers decorated every corner. Soft instrumental music played in the background. Everything felt calm. Safe. A woman in her 50s looked up from behind the counter. She wore a simple blue dress and reading glasses. Her smile reminded me of my grandmother. I wondered when you'd arrive. You know me? I know someone who's been carrying a very heavy heart. I think there's been a mistake. She shook her head. No mistake. She looked toward the shopping bag. I see someone already helped you. I found these outside. They're lovely choices. I can't wear these. Can't. I hesitated. Or won't. She smiled knowingly. Those are very different things. I looked around to make sure no one else was inside. There isn't anyone else here, is there?
No.
What if someone comes in? If they do, they'll probably be too busy living their own life to judge yours. I laughed awkwardly. I wish it were that easy. It rarely is. She walked around the counter and handed me a small wooden key. Changing room. End of the hallway. I don't think I should. You don't have to.
She paused.
But don't confuse fear with wisdom. Those words stayed with me as I slowly walked toward the fitting room. The room itself was beautiful. Large mirror, soft lighting, fresh lilies in a vase, a comfortable chair, nothing intimidating, just quiet. I locked the door. The shopping bag rested at my feet. For several minutes, I simply stared at it. My heartbeat echoed through the room. I remembered being 13 years old, secretly touching the fabric of one of my cousin's sweaters because it looked so soft. I remembered being 16, quickly closing my laptop whenever someone walked into my room after searching questions I was too embarrassed to ask aloud. I remembered buying my first blouse online and having it delivered to a pickup locker because I was terrified the delivery driver might recognize me. Years of hiding, years of guilt, years of asking myself why something so ordinary could feel so impossible. Slowly, I unfolded the cream sweater. The fabric was softer than anything I owned. The navy skirt followed, then the tights, finally, the flats. I took a deep breath. No one's here, I whispered to myself. My hands still shook. Piece by piece, I changed. Every movement felt unfamiliar, yet strangely natural. When I finally stood in front of the mirror, I almost looked away. Instead, I forced myself to keep looking. The person staring back wasn't perfect. The skirt wasn't perfectly straight. The sweater sleeves were slightly too long. My hair was still short. My face was unmistakably my own. But something had changed. Not because the clothes had transformed me into someone else. Because, for the first time in years, I wasn't fighting the reflection. The tension in my shoulders eased. My breathing slowed. A quiet smile appeared before I even realized it. Tears filled my eyes. Not tears of sadness. Not even happiness. Relief. As though I had finally set down a burden I didn't know I was allowed to put down. A gentle knock interrupted the silence. You don't have to come out until you're ready, the shopkeeper called. I looked into the mirror one more time. I don't know who you are, I whispered to my reflection. For the first time, the answer didn't frighten me. It felt like the beginning of a question I was finally ready to explore. I unlocked the fitting room door and stepped into the boutique, unaware that the next person waiting outside would recognize me in a way that would change the rest of the night forever. I took one slow step out of the fitting room, expecting to feel embarrassed the moment the door opened. Instead, I felt lighter. The shop was as quiet as before. Warm light reflected off the polished wooden floor, and for a brief moment, I forgot why I had spent so many years hiding from something that brought me such unexpected peace. The shopkeeper looked up from the counter.
She didn't gasp.
She didn't laugh.
She didn't stare.
She simply smiled the same gentle smile she had given me when I first walked in. There you are. My eyes widened. That's all you're going to say? She tilted her head. What were you expecting? I don't know, surprise maybe. I've met many people searching for themselves. She folded a cardigan before continuing. The surprising part isn't what they wear. It's how much lighter they look when they stop pretending. I looked down at the cream sweater. The sleeves covered part of my hands. The navy skirt moved gently as I shifted my weight. The tights felt unfamiliar, yet oddly comforting. Nothing about the outfit felt like a costume. It felt quiet. The kind of quiet my mind had been searching for during countless sleepless nights. I don't understand why this feels different. The shopkeeper walked toward an old mirror hanging beside the entrance. Come here. I stood beside her. She pointed at my reflection. What do you see? Myself. Only yourself. I looked more carefully. For years, I had always searched for flaws first.
My jaw.
My shoulders. My posture. Everything I believed made me look wrong.
Tonight,
I noticed something else. My eyes. They looked relaxed. Almost peaceful. I've never looked this calm. She smiled. Exactly. Before I could answer, the bell above the boutique door rang softly. Another customer entered. Instinctively, panic rushed through me. I turned away, ready to hide. The woman entering the shop looked to be in her late 20s. She carried a folded umbrella and wore a long beige coat. She glanced around before smiling politely.
Sorry.
Am I interrupting? No, the shopkeeper answered warmly. We're just having a conversation. The customer noticed me standing near the mirror. For a second, my heart stopped. This was it. She would stare. She would laugh. She would ask questions. Instead, she smiled. I love that sweater. I blinked.
What?
The color suits you. I couldn't find the words. Thank you. She casually walked toward a shelf of scarves as though nothing unusual had happened. No whispering. No judgment. No uncomfortable silence. Just another person shopping. My chest tightened. All those years. All those terrifying imaginary conversations. None of them happened. The shopkeeper quietly walked beside me. Our minds often invent much harsher audiences than reality does. I spent years believing everyone would laugh. Some people might. She nodded honestly, but many are too busy living their own lives. I watched the customer compare two scarves without paying any attention to me. The fear I had carried for so long suddenly seemed smaller. Not gone, just smaller. A few minutes later, the customer approached the counter with her purchase. As she passed me, she smiled once more. I hope you have a lovely evening. You too. She left. The bell chimed again. Silence returned. I laughed softly. I think she just changed my life without realizing it. Sometimes strangers do that. The shopkeeper picked up a small photo frame from the shelf. Inside was an old picture of 5 smiling people standing in front of the boutique. They all came here carrying different fears. What happened to them? They left carrying different futures. She handed me the frame. They still visit sometimes. They're real? As real as you. Before I could ask another question, the clock on the wall chimed midnight. 12 gentle notes echoed through the boutique. The shopkeeper's smile faded slightly. You don't have much time. What do you mean? The last train returns before sunrise. I thought it disappeared. It always comes back. And if I miss it? She looked toward the window. Then this place becomes your home. My stomach tightened. I have a family. I know.
A job.
I know. A life. She looked directly into my eyes. Do you have a life? Or do you only have responsibilities? The question hit harder than I expected. I thought about my apartment. My routine. Wake up.
Work. Come home. Pretend.
Sleep.
Repeat.
I couldn't remember the last time I had genuinely smiled before tonight. The shopkeeper placed a small notebook into my hands. Its cover was pale pink with a pressed lavender flower. What's this? Open it. The first page was blank. The second contained a single handwritten sentence. Write one truth you've never allowed yourself to say. Below, it was an empty space. I can't. You can. I don't even know what to write. She handed me a fountain pen. Don't think. My hand trembled as the pen touched the paper. For nearly a minute, nothing happened. Then the words slowly appeared. I feel peaceful when I allow myself to express my feminine side. I stared at the sentence. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a confession to the world. It was simply the first completely honest sentence I had written about myself. A single tear landed on the page. The ink blurred slightly. The shopkeeper nodded. Now it's real. I've always known it. Knowing quietly. She gently closed the notebook. And admitting it to yourself are very different things. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. Moonlight filled the street. The station lamps glowed in the distance. For the first time since arriving, I noticed other people walking peacefully through the town. Some wore elegant dresses. Some wore suits. Some mixed styles freely. Everyone looked comfortable being themselves. No one seemed interested in judging anyone else. It wasn't perfection. It was acceptance. I wondered what kind of place this really was. Then I noticed something that made my heart skip. Across the street, standing beneath one of the old lanterns, was someone who looked exactly like me. Except they weren't wearing the anxious expression I had known my entire life. They smiled gently, raised a hand toward me, and silently invited me to come outside. I couldn't breathe. The person standing beneath the lantern wasn't just similar to me. It was me. The same height, the same face, the same eyes. But everything about the expression was different. The version of me outside looked free, not because of the clothes, not because of the smile, because there was no fear left in those eyes. I turned to the shopkeeper. "Who is that?" She followed my gaze toward the window. "Who do you think it is?" "It looks exactly like me." "Then perhaps you've answered your own question." "I don't understand." "You don't need to understand every step before taking the next one." She opened the boutique door. The cool night air drifted inside. "If you want answers, go ask." I stepped outside. The cobblestone street shimmered from the rain. The lanterns cast warm circles of light across the ground. The other version of me waited patiently. As I approached, they smiled. "I've been waiting." My voice barely came out. "Who are you?" "I'm the person you stopped allowing yourself to become." "That's impossible." "Is it?" They looked toward the quiet station. "Every choice creates a different path." "I've made mistakes." "So have I." "I've wasted years." They weren't wasted. They felt wasted. My reflection shook their head. They were years spent surviving. The words landed heavily. I had spent so much time blaming myself for hiding that I had forgotten why I hid in the first place. Fear. Family expectations. The worry of disappointing everyone. The fear of becoming someone people wouldn't understand. I kept thinking one day I'd wake up without these feelings. So did I. They never disappeared.
No.
Why? Because they weren't something to defeat. They placed a hand over their heart. They were something to understand. Silence settled between us. The town remained peaceful. Somewhere in the distance, a clock chimed once. I thought clothes would answer everything. They don't. I thought changing how I looked would magically make life easier. They won't. So what changes? You do. I looked down at the cream sweater. When I first wore this tonight, I expected fireworks. And I just felt calm. They smiled. That's what you've really been searching for. We began walking together through the quiet streets. No destination. Just walking. The houses were beautiful, each with flower boxes beneath the windows. Small cafes glowed with warm light. People laughed softly over tea. No one stared at us. No one whispered. For the first time in years, I wasn't scanning every face, wondering if someone was judging me. My shoulders slowly relaxed. We stopped outside a small bridge crossing a narrow stream. The water reflected the moon like polished silver. My reflection leaned against the railing. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "What scares you the most?" I didn't answer immediately. Finally, I whispered, "My father." The words surprised even me. Not because they weren't true, because I'd never admitted them aloud. I've spent my whole life trying to become the son he wanted. And were you happy? No. Were you honest?
No.
Were you kind to yourself? I looked away. No. They nodded gently. You kept everyone else comfortable. I tried. But you left yourself behind. The sentence echoed inside me. I remembered every birthday where I pretended to enjoy gifts that never felt like me. Every family gathering where I laughed at jokes that hurt. Every shopping trip where I walked past clothes that quietly caught my attention without allowing myself even a second glance. I had become an expert at disappearing inside my own life. I don't want to keep living like that. You don't have to, but people might not understand. They might not. I could lose relationships. Possibly. I could disappoint people. Yes. Each answer was honest. There were no fairy tales here. No promises that everything would magically become easy. Only truth. Then they asked one final question. If you spend the next 20 years pretending, who exactly wins? I had no answer. The silence itself became my answer. A gentle whistle echoed across the town. The train. We both turned toward the station. Golden lights appeared in the distance as the last train slowly rolled back onto the platform. It's time, my reflection said. I don't want to leave. You have to. What if I forget tonight? You won't. What if I become afraid again? You will. I frowned. That doesn't sound very encouraging. They laughed. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing honesty even after fear returns. The station platform was almost empty. The young woman from the beginning of the journey stood beside one of the benches. She smiled as if she had expected this moment all along. The shopkeeper stood near the boutique door, waving quietly. Neither of them tried to stop me. Neither of them told me what decision to make. The reflection beside me reached into their pocket. I think this belongs to you. They handed me the pale pink notebook. I looked down. Inside, beneath the sentence I had written earlier, another line had appeared. Peace begins the moment you stop asking permission to be honest with yourself. I didn't write this.
No.
Who did? They smiled. You did. I looked up. For a single heartbeat, they were gone. Only the notebook remained in my hands. The train doors slid open. I took one deep breath, then stepped inside, wondering whether I was returning home or finally traveling toward it. The doors closed with a soft hiss. As the train pulled away from the quiet station, I looked through the window, expecting to see the little town growing smaller in the distance. Instead, the lanterns faded into a gentle golden glow before disappearing completely into the morning mist. Within minutes, the familiar city skyline returned. Apartment buildings, traffic lights, graffiti-covered walls. Everything looked exactly as it had before. Had any of it really happened? I reached into my backpack. The cream sweater was gone. The navy skirt was gone. The flats and tights had disappeared. For one frightening moment, I thought I had imagined everything. Then my fingers touched something familiar. The pale pink notebook. I slowly opened it. The sentence I had written was still there. I feel peaceful when I allow myself to express my feminine side. Below it was one final line. Don't let this become another secret you bury. I closed the notebook and smiled. No matter how impossible the night had been, one thing was undeniably real. I was no longer lying to myself. When I reached my apartment, the sun had just begun to rise. The same walls, the same furniture, the same quiet rooms, yet they somehow felt different. For years, I had viewed this apartment as a place to hide. Now it felt like a place where I could finally be honest. I unpacked my backpack, folded my ordinary clothes, made coffee. Then I opened the closet. Hidden behind several jackets was a small storage box I hadn't touched for months. Inside were the few feminine clothes I had almost thrown away the night before. The lavender blouse, the black skirt, the cardigan, the ballet flats. I smiled. I almost said goodbye to you forever. Instead of hiding the box again, I carefully organized everything on proper hangers. It was a small action. No audience. No applause. Just one quiet decision. For the first time, my closet contained every part of me instead of only the part one thought others wanted to see. Life didn't magically become perfect. Monday morning
Still arrived.
Work deadlines still existed. Bills still needed to be paid. My father still called every Sunday. The world hadn't changed overnight, but something inside me had. Instead of spending every evening pretending those feelings didn't exist, I began giving myself permission to explore them safely and honestly in my own home. Some nights, I simply wore the cardigan while reading a book. Other evenings, I experimented with different outfits, learning which colors made me feel comfortable. I watched makeup tutorials. Read stories from people with experiences different from mine. I stopped asking, "What's wrong with me?" and started asking, "What helps me feel like myself?" That single change transformed everything. Weeks passed. One Saturday afternoon, I found myself standing outside a small cafe. My hands trembled as I adjusted my outfit beneath a long beige coat. Nothing dramatic, just a simple navy skirt, soft sweater, comfortable flats, natural makeup I had spent almost an hour carefully practicing. My heart pounded harder than it ever had. I almost turned around 3 separate times. Then I remembered the notebook. Peace begins the moment you stop asking permission to be honest with yourself. I walked inside. No one gasped. No one pointed. The barista smiled politely. "What can I get for you?" I ordered a cappuccino. "That'll be ready in just a few minutes." That was it. The terrifying moment I had imagined for years lasted less than 30 seconds. I sat beside the window. Outside, people hurried through their ordinary lives. Inside, I quietly enjoyed my coffee. For the first time in public, I wasn't counting how many people were looking at me, because I realized something surprising. Most weren't. They were busy living their own lives. Just like the shopkeeper had said. Months turned into a year. Little by little, confidence replaced fear. Not every day. Some mornings doubt returned. Some evenings I questioned everything again. Growth wasn't a straight line. But every time fear whispered, "Go back to hiding," I remembered that mysterious train. I remembered the peaceful station. The boutique called Second Beginning. The stranger who somehow understood me before I understood myself. And the version of me standing beneath the lantern with fearless eyes. Whether they had been real or simply a reflection of hope no longer mattered. The lesson remained. One rainy evening, almost exactly 1 year later, I finished work later than usual. The weather was strangely familiar. Without thinking, my feet carried me toward the railway station. The platform looked completely ordinary. Commuters checked their phones. Children laughed. Announcements echoed overhead. Nothing seemed unusual. Then I noticed an elderly woman sitting quietly on a nearby bench. She smiled as I approached. "Long day?" The question made me stop. I smiled back. "You could say that." She looked toward my shoulder. "You don't seem to be carrying such a heavy bag anymore." My heartbeat quickened. Before I could ask what she meant, the announcement echoed across the station. "Final train now arriving." I turned toward the tracks. When I looked back, the bench was empty. The woman had vanished. In her place lay a single pressed lavender flower. I carefully picked it up and slipped it inside my notebook. Some mysteries don't need solving. Some journeys aren't meant to be explained. They're meant to be remembered. Years later, people occasionally asked me what changed my life. Some expected a dramatic answer. A life coach.
A book.
A relationship. A miracle. I simply smiled. I stopped running from myself, because that was the truth. The last train home hadn't taken me to another town. It had taken me somewhere far more important. To the quiet place inside myself, where fear no longer made every decision. Home, I eventually realized, was never a station, or a city, or even a house. Home was the moment I finally treated myself with the same kindness I had spent years offering everyone else. And whenever life became confusing again, I opened the little pink notebook. The pages never changed. Yet every time I read them, they reminded me of the same simple truth. The longest journey I would ever take wasn't across railway tracks or distant cities. It was the journey from pretending to living honestly. That was the destination the last train had always been trying to reach. And this time, I never missed it.